Keep the applause going now for Harwood Taylor.
Thank you. I always remember loving my father's hands. In the mid-'60s and the early '70s, I was probably about this high, and I would put my chin right where his typewriter was. And he had one of those old stacked key typewriters. Remember the tick, 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 zing, tick, 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 zing? That sound was ever present, and it was like white noise in our childhood. And he was also a draftsman. He did these beautiful drawings with charcoal, and he would use his fingers. They would turn black, pushing the material around to shade or contour a figure drawing. And I saw his fingers in wet clay. There was just a grace about his fingers and his hands that I just always remember being fascinated by. He was also bipolar, and if you don't know what that is, it's just basically a chemical imbalance that'll make you, maybe very excitable and high sometimes, and also very low sometimes. It can be very scary, frankly, for a young family, and it was for me and my sisters. And just to give you a fuller picture, I mean that sort of feeling of uneasiness. I loved my dad, and he was creative, and he was brilliant, and could be very entertaining, but just emotionally didn't feel safe. For the last probably 15 plus years of his life, my sisters didn't speak to him. I, on the other hand, decided after lots of therapy and men's work is when you try to get closer to your dad and try to heal wounds usually, and it enabled me to commit to have breakfast with him every Sunday. And I remember one Sunday one of my sisters said, "How can you do that?" And I said, "It's service work." And she laughed, and I said, "I'm not kidding. I mean, it really was that hard to have breakfast with him. It was just that I didn't feel safe." So anyway, that was when he was 70. Well, when he was 82, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I didn't know anything about it. It scared me, and I called, got online, looked up everything I could learn about it, and I found the Houston Alzheimer's Association, great organization, by the way. And they had these classes, and they would put the patients, my dad included, in one classroom, and they'd put me and the other caregivers in the other classroom. And afterward, we'd come and have lunch and talk about things, and it was the kind of stuff you never want to have to talk about, period, on earth. And yet, we got closer. And my heart certainly opened a little bit, knowing that one day he might look at me and, not know who I was. So, going to pick him up one Sunday and for our obligatory Sunday breakfast, and it's not obligatory anymore. I want to be with my dad now, because I know that, time might be short. And we're driving along, and I look down, and his 82-year-old hand, beautiful 82-year-old hand, is sitting there on the middle console. And I just had this nice thought. I want to hold my father's hand. And I'm driving, and I came to a red light, and I looked down, and I couldn't do it. And I was so scared. And all these things were going through my head, like, you did all this therapy, and then these men's groups, and, what is this? I can't hold my father's hand, my 82-year-old father's hand. What's wrong with me? And then I thought, how many times did my dad hold my hand, little Harwood's hand, as a boy, as a child? Maybe my little hand in his hand, maybe every day, thousands of times. What's wrong with me? Well, luckily, or saved by the green light, I started driving again, turning this over in my head, and I come to the next red light. I look down, and I see his hand again, and I just say, I want to hold my father's hand. I can't do it. I thought, is he going to use that sharp wit and say something mean to me? Is he going to pull his hand away? Would he hit me? Because he had hit me. So I remembered I was here in Houston, and I turned onto Heights Boulevard, and there was a stop sign, and there wasn't anybody behind us. There happened to be a woman sitting on a bench. I don't know why we caught eyes. And when I took my hand off the steering wheel, it was just a few inches to touch my father's hand, but it might as well have been my foot leaving a 1,000-foot bungee jump. It was the scariest thing I did in my life. And when I touched his hand, immediately his other hand came over and covered my hand. And it was like he'd been waiting for me to do that. And it felt strangely, familiar, like we had been doing it forever. For the last 2 years of my father's life, whenever we went anywhere in a car, we held hands.
Keep it going for Harwood.